Hello, this is Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to Bridges Live, but this is not Bridges Live. This is Bridges Live presents Freedom Fight. And I have my co-host here with Josh Hatch, and he is of freedomfighters.info. Freedomfighters.info. Most of you people are going to hear this on my podcast, on all the podcast channels, Bridges Live. But we're going to have this show specifically every other week because we are in the midst of a freedom fight. And as I introduce my partner here, he'll explain more of the fight of what we're talking about because it is a fight. And now when we say, are we fighting for our freedom? How is our freedom being taken away from us? Some of you take your freedom for granted. And I absolutely believe that. I do believe that you think that everything is something easy for you to have and for you to never be without. But it can be taken away from you. Yeah. You can be taken away from you. And so, Josh, thank you for being my partner here on Freedom Fight. I know you believe that this is a situation we must grab a hold of and we must wake up our community. And I know we've talked offline and a lot of times, and this is why we were developing this show called Freedom Fight. So you being the founder of Freedom Fighters, and we got the banner flying high, right?
Most definitely.
Please,
I like it. Looks good.
Thank you. I had my decorators come in and paint the whole thing.
Okay, that's good.
So tell us about you and Freedom Fight and why you started, and then because some people are going to hear this show for the first time, and they still know that I'm an activist. They know I'm a powerful activist and what I believe in. And this is part of that belief. Please.
Dr. Dyer, thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank everybody who's listening in and those who will listen in the future. As you said, my name is Joshua Hatch. You can find the website for Freedom Fighters at freedomfighters.info. This is imperative. When I say this, I'm talking about this discussion that we're having. Dealing with just various aspects of the criminal justice, and just utilizing that term loosely, the criminal justice system, because the community really is at a loss for some of the things that they're witnessing, some of the things that they're seeing in the community, and some of the things that are playing out in the courtrooms. Turning our attention to Baltimore City, for an example, there's a lot of drama being played out with, Marilyn Mosby, which I must say, I truly commend her for some of the changes that she's made, such as not prosecuting low-level offenses,
right?
And, not prosecuting, those who are in possession of marijuana, because these are some of the changes that need to be made. We understand that. Too many people are becoming incarcerated that are from our communities. We have too many instances where people are being snatched away from the community, and they're being snatched away and wrongly convicted. And we have several instances of that. When I say wrongful conviction, I'm talking about a person who is prosecuted, tried, and incarcerated based upon false information that is utilized by the prosecutor, the police, and the court system in order to incarcerate that person. We had a previous show where we were talking to the community about a case with a gentleman that we call Freedom. And in Freedom's case, a lot of his constitutional rights were violated.
I'll try yours. There you go. Here we go, Scrap. Just listen from my phone.
Get into that. I want to say this, Dr. Dyer. For me, as someone who's returning to the community, who's strongly advocating for those who are incarcerated, it's so important having experience of long period of incarceration for me to express and tell the views of those who are currently behind the wall.
You hear this right?
And in this particular case, and I'd ask the listeners too, if you're on the Zoom, please mute your phones. In this particular instance, Freedom asked me to pose a question to the community. And I think the questions that he wanted posed and raised are so important because the community has a hard time with
understanding.
Actually understanding.
They just don't get
it. And actually seeing the connection in someone else's situation because we've been programmed and we've been taught to worry about self, right? So the questions that he wanted me to pose was very, very simple. Imagine your child, someone whom you love dearly, someone whom you watched grow up and you've helped to raise, be taken away from you, snatched away from you by the police department, charged with a crime that your child says that he did not commit. Now, you know your child better than anybody. You hear your child's plea. You're listening to what's being said, but you also know your child. So when it comes time for trial, your child is tried with information that is false. Your child's lawyer is withheld from properly representing him or her in court because the state and the police department have chose that they are going to be the judge and jury and withhold facts, which would exonerate you, which would exonerate your child. And you watch your child go through the criminal justice system, and it is a system, and it's actually doing exactly what it was designed to do.
So
you just don't
the
know
system works.
It works
for them.
Very well.
It works.
Right. And your child is convicted, and then later on you find out that your child was telling the truth, something that you've known all along, that the information, that the very story that your child parakeeted to you from a prison cell on a 15 to 30 minute phone call was actually true. And not only was it actually true, but you have information to corroborate his story. And even though you have this information and it's knowledge, it's fact, the state's attorney and the court system still sits on their hands and does whatever it is that they want to do simply because we know that the prison industrial complex, everything is about money. So if you're not of the rich, and that's why, we understand.
Josh, do you think, and you had time to think about this, and this is important, do you think people who have no connection to prison or incarceration ever think that prison systems are about money? Do you think they ever think about that?
No, because
I don't think so either.
They don't, and the reason why is because these are facts that are hidden, just like wrongful convictions are hidden. In Freedom's case, the information about him actually being convicted, or the information that would have liberated him, and that his attorney could have used at trial, was hidden from him. It wasn't information that was, just in a file or someone mistakenly overlooked. No, this was something that was consciously withheld. Not one fact of the case, or two or three or four facts of the case, but several damning facts of the case. And I want us to also use this platform to educate the community when it comes to their constitutional rights.
So before we get there, here's a question I know people will ask who have a skepticism. I'll put it that way. How do you know what is fact and what isn't fact? How did you come to that information?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Before I answer, let me say this. Because of the profession that I'm in, I have contact with my brothers and sisters that are incarcerated. And that's how I see them.
Yep.
Right? Very seldom do I have a brother or a sister present a case to me and lay out from A to Z all of the errors, inconsistencies, and all of the points proving their innocence. It's very hard to obtain that type of information when you're incarcerated. Freedom, however, when he approached me, I'm going to tell you, I couldn't believe the case and how he was laying things out for me, because he was saying he was innocent. The accusations that he was making was unbelievable. Unbelievable in the sense that he would have all of this information, and yet since 1989, he's still sitting in prison. So when I received the information and I started to comb through it, I could not believe it. I could not believe it. And when I say you have a constitutional right, there's certain things that the state must do in a criminal trial. And I don't have to be a lawyer, neither do you, as a community member, to understand these rights, because they're spelled out for you. And your 5th and 14th Amendment right deals with your due process. And to make it real simple and plain, it's just fair treatment. The fair treatment through normal judicial systems. So to be treated fair, and in this case, to be provided information that the court is obligated to give the defense attorney so that he can prepare for the actual case before a judge or a jury to decide as a prosecutor and to decide as a police officer that you're not going to provide that information. That is crazy, to say the least. This man has been sitting so long. And again, when I say Brady violations, it was a case in the Supreme Court where, and I'm doing this in layman's terms.
Yes.
You can go online and you can get all of the professional legal terminology if you like. But for you to understand, it was a Supreme Court case that talked about information that prosecutors withhold and how it violated a defendant's constitutional due process right.
And what is that case?
And that's Brady versus Maryland. And the court has always said that prosecutors must turn over information, especially when that information can prove a person's innocence or even their guilt.
They must.
They must.
Mandatory.
Mandatory. And it's not something that a defense attorney has to know for himself. And in this particular instance, the defense attorney thought that the prosecution could be in possession of certain information which would prove his client's innocence. He thought. And because he thought that, he put in 2 requests to the state's attorney's office for information pertaining to his client's innocence. And both times he was denied. He was told that they didn't have information pertaining to his client's innocence.
And this is what we're talking about. So we have to pause here, people, as you listen to the show called Freedom Fight. Because if you don't know your constitutional law, if you don't know your constitutional rights, your freedom is or already has been taken away. If you don't know your constitutional rights, your freedom is already taken away. And if you want it back, if you want to fight for this back, you must engage, read, educate, and best of all, ask questions.
Most definitely.
Say,
Most definitely.
You know what? I don't know where to find it. I read something. I don't know what it means. I heard this. Is this true? Ask the question, because you can ask Josh, and we have the show called "You Be the Judge." You can ask, and we'll find you the answer, because we do know attorneys, we do know judges, we do know people in the court system that can answer this question verbatim what you're asking. So here's
something, Dr. Dyer?
Yeah.
But I also want us to understand too, though, knowing is not enough.
No.
Knowing is not enough, because
you got to do.
There's a lot of guys that are incarcerated right now that know the law. They know the law. They understand the law. And they've studied the law. They've taken the years that they've been deprived of their life and their liberty and their freedom to study the very thing that holds them in captivity. Mm-hmm. And when they step in these courtrooms, they can speak, quote, articulate the law better than some attorneys. Some attorneys utilize what's widely discredited with your jailhouse lawyers in order to prepare cases. Mm-hmm. You'll never hear about it, but a lot of people that are in prison are bright and they're smart. So knowing the law is not enough. Being able to actually enforce what it is that you know and how you do that.
It's a difference.
Is by the community advocating and saying, hey, listen, no more of incarcerating our members of our community when you don't have enough evidence in order to secure a conviction. No more withholding or coloring facts to fit your narrative. Because let's look at it. Since the 80s, and let's just talk about the 80s in the Baltimore City Police Department, the homicide department in particular. The homicide department in Baltimore City in the 80s was notorious for coercing witnesses to falsely testify in cases in order to secure convictions. They have been known for the collection of poor evidence and losing evidence. Well, they've been known for pressuring witnesses into testifying.
If people didn't see the movie of the 5 boys out of New York who got wrongly convicted of raping that girl, who was recently released, they made the movie about it. If people have seen these movies, seen these shows, they know it happens. They know it is. How about this? It's based on true stories. So the movie, they know it has happened. And if you believe that something has happened, I hope you still believe, unless you're involved, it is still happening.
It happens today, most definitely. And you don't have to know about the true story that you're talking about that may be public in the public view.
Right.
You can look in your backyard and see what's going on in your own community, down the street, around the corner, and know that someone in your community right now is going through a legal process. 9 times out of 10, his rights are being violated. Why is that? Because, again, this is not something that is new.
No.
This is a culture. This is a practice. This is a pattern that has been solidified in cities like Baltimore. And again, I want to go back to what I was saying about Marilyn Mosby.
Yep.
Marilyn Mosby, one of the things that I like that she did was she continued to invest in her effort for the CIU, the Conviction Integrity Unit. And also, I believe they have a sentence review unit now as well.
Okay.
And it's sad that you would even have to have prosecutors to overlook prosecutors prosecuting cases when they're supposed to be doing it for the interest of justice. But nonetheless, she has done a great job by making sure that that's in place. The question becomes is, what are some of the legislative moves that need to be made in order to deter prosecutors from doing this in the future? We know that there's a slew of individuals currently incarcerated right now that have been wrongly convicted, that their cases need to be reviewed. Baltimore has acknowledged it. PG County has acknowledged it. I hope that all of the jurisdictions acknowledge that they need to start combing through especially some of the older cases that they have. But it's not enough advocates out here actually studying and being involved in cases just like this.
What does the Attorney General say about all this?
I don't know. I don't know what the Attorney General is saying about this. I know that the Attorney General is a representative of a system that has not recognized the rights of all.
No.
And what I mean, recognize the rights of all, I shouldn't have to spend $35,000 to obtain an attorney just to ensure that I'm heard in my day for my day in court. Everyone should have the opportunity to defend themselves, and it should be examined equally, no matter what your color, your race, your background, political background, views, or beliefs are. But sadly, in order for me to actually get acknowledged in court, I have to have a paid attorney, or I have to hope and pray that I have a public defender that has the opportunity to really view my case and actually step forward and put in some effort to liberate me through the legal means. And so I'm focusing on wrongful convictions because since 1989, according to WJZ's news, there's been 2,548 people that have been released for a crime that they did not commit.
Hold on. Since what year?
1989. Since 1980, this is according to WJZ report. There's been 2,548 people released for a crime they did not commit. And these are wrongful convictions. And the number one cause for wrongful convictions is eyewitness error, where someone is reporting on a particular crime. They may not necessarily be lying.
First of all,
may not necessarily.
It has been proven that, and I work with the science of the mind. You can't trust an eyewitness because how they see it when they see it has more to do with their perception and their interpretation.
Most definitely. And in this particular case, one of the witnesses in Freedom's case, something that was withheld from the attorney was the fact that the state's witness had a motive to lie. He had 2 open warrants for his arrest during the time that he was due to testify, and he never was arrested, and he never was served for his warrants. And so this is what I'm saying about that culture, going back to that culture.
Right.
Now, you and I both know that if you step into a courtroom and it's known, Dr. Dyer, that you have a warrant for your arrest, you won't even make it past search.
No.
You're not. As soon as you walk through the metal detector, it's going to be a sheriff or 2, and depending on how big you are and your record, it might be 4 or 5. In my case, when they call the police on me, 15 come. But either way, you're going in handcuffs.
You're going.
And you're going to the precinct. In this particular case, because the state needed something from him, which was a favor, his warrant was not served. He walked in the courtroom, pimped right on upstairs, got on the stand, did everything that the prosecutor told him to do, and left. That's a problem. And it's a problem because the attorney in the case was never told
about this,
that this particular person had a warrant for his arrest at the time, and that the state was offering him favor, whether it be stated or implied, by not serving him or having him served on the warrants that he had. And these are just small things. Actually, they're big because they're violations.
So here's the thing, Josh. You know, when we're going to be talking about legal issues, court issues, people who have been incarcerated on wrongful convictions, and we're going to be talking about that. But there's a beginning to this rope. And it doesn't start with us being born. It just doesn't. And it seems like we can, between us two black men and other black men, it can appear to be we come out of the wound ready to get arrested. That's how it's been written up. That's how it's been portrayed. It's a fact. Okay, we know that there's dirty cops. We know that because Hollywood makes a ton of movies about dirty cops since forever, right?
Right.
Forever. They make movies about dirty cops. So it's dirty cops, dirty leadership in the police departments, not just patrol officers, but captains, lieutenants. There's dirty mayors. We know that. And this is all part of this system, right? You have the cops, you have the leadership in the police department, you have the city government, there's crooks, you have attorneys who work in the district attorney's office who has been prosecuted. And yet, the people who are incarcerated has to go through a gauntlet of a lot of dirty people. Now, is there someone that's calm in here and honest and true, buried with all these other dirty issues and probabilities? Absolutely. I don't think everyone's bad. I really don't. I don't chase ghosts.
No.
But now you're wrongfully convicted, and now all these people who have had their hands in it have to then take back what they said. That's not going to happen, and that's why you do the work you do.
Most definitely. And the thing about it is, you run across statements like this from officers in the Baltimore City Police Department, where you had an officer named Detective Kincaid, where he told someone who he was incarcerating, he said, "You have 2 strikes against you. Strike number 1, you're black. Strike number 2, I have a badge." And that's the culture that has been created. And because we're black and because they have a badge, I'm not saying all officers, Dr. Dyer.
No.
But you and I cannot judge an institution based upon 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 good officers.
No.
We have to judge an institution based on what is produced out of that institution by the collective.
Correct.
And collectively, those institutions are failing. Do they have an opportunity to serve the community like they say that they do? Of course they do. However, they will have to take a strong look at some of the things that are going on and examine themselves in the mirror and ask why. And the answer to that question is simply because, again, this is a culture that has been created.
And
it's acceptable. It's acceptable to incarcerate someone and for them to be guilty until they prove that they're innocent. And in Freedom's case, Freedom was supposed to be treated like he was innocent until he was proven guilty. Being proven guilty means that I'm going to ensure that you're treated fairly. I'm going to ensure that I uphold and enforce all of your rights that is spelled out in the so-called Constitution and in law. And in a lot of cases, too many cases, that doesn't happen.
When I hope people understand that when we talk about your freedom and your fight, what is constitutionally yours, what we need you to do, and this is just, and I'll ask this every week we do the show. What we need you to do is not just understand what we're talking about, but activate yourself so it can be stopped. Because the only way, and please, the people who are on the line, you got to put your stuff on mute. The things that needs to stop is the only way if you activate. So we want to let people know how can they activate so they can help in our freedom fight.
Oh, most definitely. Let me tell you some of the things that you can do. Number one, you can pick up the phone and call 443-822-9208. Let me say that number again. 443-822-9208. And that phone number rings my phone. And I'm going to list and instruct you on exactly how you can begin to advocate in your area. And it starts with your elected officials. Start to get to know your elected officials. Advocating on behalf of those that are incarcerated. Right now, you have prisoners being held together. Some are positive for the coronavirus and some are negative, but they are being forced to cohabitate. There are a number of issues that are going on dealing with the criminal justice system, and what we're calling on is a complete reform of that system. But it's going to take the community.
It can only take the community. We can't do this by ourselves.
Most definitely. When you start to hold those individuals accountable, when you start to pick up the phone and call them and request to meet with them, when they start to see that the community collectively is standing behind an issue, then they'll start to listen. And this is the reason why. Because a politician is really, and again, I'm speaking about most of them. I can't say all of them.
Right.
Most politicians are really concerned about one thing. And Dr. Dyer, you know what that one thing is, right? Re-election.
Yeah.
Because the community, the community collectively showing its power together in unity can say, hey, look, I want to really have you look at this issue. This is an issue for us, not just an issue for the family or the person who's going through it, but it's an actual issue for us. And collectively, we're standing together behind this issue, and we're demanding for there to be some type of change. We're demanding for there to be some type of action. Everybody should be outraged every time they learn about someone in their community being harmed through the process of the judicial system.
But that's the issue, Josh. People are not informed. People care too much about getting what they want in the time they want it, whether it be something of material, something of personal use, whatever it is. They're more thinking about their life or their issues, so they never look beyond themselves, right? And if
so,
go ahead.
And I think that in instances like that, my focus is not on what it is that they are doing. Speaking about the community,
right?
My focus is on what I can do to change that.
Yeah, me too.
And what I can do to change that is I can start by coming on this show and advocating on behalf of individuals like Freedom. I can start by going and talking to a neighbor or taking a telephone call and educating someone about something that's going on that they can actually take a hold to and take claim of and actually help to change. And when you start to slowly but surely educate people on how they can become involved in the process and they can feel a part of it, then you can start to actually grow a movement of change.
Right.
And that's what I'm seeking to do. Grow a movement of change.
Because if you don't, you can have governors like the one in Georgia who's intentionally signs in a bill that denies things for you, for the people, to exclude certain people to do certain things to help make a movement. So if you don't fight for your freedom, you could have that governor. You could go to that state. You could be in that city. You could be approached by that cop and your blackness, and that means you already have 2 strikes. One,
you already have been approached. You already have been approached. Right. Even if you weren't approached, your brother or your sister was approached by that cop. Your brother or your sister went through the process and was wrongly convicted at 19 years old and has been sitting in prison since 1989. Your brother and sister was the one who was taken based off of a lie that the police department has made. And I'm not just talking about Freedom. we could talk about a lot of people in the community right now who were tried and who were convicted and were not convicted based on the standard that they're saying that they're enforcing. Here's my thing, Dr. Dyer. It's one thing for a person to commit a crime.
Right.
But according to the law,
right.
It's another thing whether or not you're able to prove that that person committed a crime, and you're able to do so without breaking the law yourself.
Right.
In most instances.
Because a lot of people always talk about this. You're just trying to put criminals back on the street. But we're not talking about criminals. We're not talking about people who committed a crime.
No, we're not talking about putting criminals back on the street. But the biggest crime is for you to perpetrate like you're enforcing a law, but yet and still you're breaking other laws in order to enforce that one. How does that look? How does it look for you to say that you're upholding justice while at the same time you're denying the justice of multiple people by denying the person to have their fair day in court? A fair day, not so your convictions numbers can be secured and your job can be secured or your political interest is secured. No. Do your job according to the way in which it's supposed to be done. You're supposed to be non-biased as a judge. You're supposed to ensure that the person that's standing before you is treated fairly. And it doesn't happen like that. A person has a right to counsel. That's the Sixth Amendment. However, we find too much in our community
that
right is denied. Because although they may have counsel, they don't have effective counsel. And when you don't have effective counsel, that's like not having no counsel at all. So it's too many things.
And we know some of those attorneys make those backroom deals so they don't work the case. Now, I don't want to, like, again, we cannot say these blanket statements saying all attorneys, all this, all that, all this. We're unable to ever say that, and I hope you don't say it either. The people that are listening, the people who will listen, the people who share and like and love this program, don't use all, because it isn't all. But we do know it has happened. We do know it's happening. That's all I'm saying.
It's a practice.
Right.
It's a practice. A daily practice that's being done. Because every day that freedom sits in prison, every day that another community member sits in prison and they're wrongly convicted, that's a person's rights being violated. Every day you incarcerate someone and they don't have the right to effective counsel, you're denying them a right. Every time you incarcerate someone and you leave them sitting in pretrial detention facilities for 2 years and then you let them go, you denied their right. You know, every time that you deny a person the ability to confront a witness, or you suppress, or you're not willing to suppress certain evidence because you need it in order to convict someone, you deny a person's right.
When you find these evidence and when you get the papers after years later, you finally discover you have these discoveries. You have the papers in your hand. You have it written in your hand. It's documents. You resubmit them back to the courts, and now it's up to them to bring it up to light. But if they refuse to do it, that's where we get stuck. And that's where we need the people.
The court system is layered. It's like onion. And so they make it very difficult for you to get out of prison.
Yes.
You have to, you have to go through all these hurdles. They have time restrictions and they have all these rules, but yet and still they know you don't have no money.
Right.
They know it's hard for you to even communicate with your family, even though you may have loved ones that care about you, that want to help you. Still, they're restricted because you're restricted from calling.
Right.
You're restricted from communicating. There's so many things that prevent a person from actually being able to defend themselves that it's ridiculous. And like I said,
there's people, here's the thing, people. Now, people who have been locked up, have been in jail, there's a commissary. You can get a card, phone card, but you can get your commissary privileges revoked because of what they say you did or what you are. It's a punishment.
I mean, everything in prison is a privilege. You know, everything, they say you have no rights. And we have to understand what prison is.
Right.
And for those who don't know, let me tell you what it is. It's really simple. It's modern day slavery. My last name is Hatch. During the times of slavery, they had a plantation called the Hatch Plantation. Just like they had a plantation called the Dyer Plantation. Mm-hmm. Just like they have the Leonard Plantation or the Jones Plantation or the Smith Plantation. Well, that plantation or that method of operating plantations was transformed. It evolved, just like a computer did, just like your phones evolved. It evolved from private ownership and was institutionalized into state and federal ownership. So now they don't have the Jones and the Hatch Plantation and the Dyer Plantation. Now they have Patuxent, Jessup Correctional Institution, the federal institution in North Branch, North Branch Correctional Institution, BCCC down in Baltimore. And these are the plantation. And just like on the Hatch Plantation, in the Jones Plantation, in the Smith Plantation, you would work the actual yard.
Right.
You would, pick crops and cotton and things like that. Now they have things like Maryland Correctional Enterprise. Yep. And you're making license plates and you're wrapping police cars and ambulances and you're sewing on patches and you're making furniture for the state.
Yep.
So guess what? The system just evolved itself. That's all it did. And guess what else? Who do you think they're going to fill these prisons with? The same people they filled the plantation with, brothers and sisters. That's who they fill them with. And so when you walk into a chow hall in prison, chow hall that doesn't have no AC in it.
Nope.
And when soon as you walk through the door, you immediately feel the difference in the air. It's humid. It's hot. The walls are sweating. It's 100 degrees outside, but probably 200 degrees inside that cafeteria because they have all these ovens that are on and all this food that's being fixed. And they have about 1,000 people sitting in one small chow hall. And these brothers, they sit and they congregate, and you see the disparity in incarceration. You see it right there before your eyes. People have family reunions in prison. Not because they want to, but because of how the system is set up to incarcerate people. And when you're incarcerated and you get those 6 digits behind your last name, when you come home, society most often is unforgiving.
Yep, they don't forgive.
So you walk out with $50. You have all these restrictions on you. You have to report to your PO. You have to go to this class. You have to report down here and sign this paper. You have to maintain a job. They want you to check in monthly. They want you to do all these different things. And they make it hard for you.
Maintain a job of a job that's never going to hire you because you were convicted.
Yeah, most definitely. Jobs will not hire you because you have conviction on your record.
Because the job will say, it's not because I don't want to hire you, it's because my insurance won't allow me to hire you.
Most definitely.
My insurance won't cover you as an employee because you've been convicted.
We know that's a smokescreen. It's just that, listen, they really want to just say, and I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't trust you. You have a record.
Yeah. And
so because, you made a mistake in your life and you were incarcerated, I don't want to give you a chance.
Right.
You don't know how many times I ran into that when I first came home. I just so happened to be able to get a job because I knew somebody. But if I didn't, I would have a hard time obtaining a job security all because of something that was done 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Do you know I'm 54 years old? Maybe that matters. But in my life, I've only gotten 2 jobs because I knew someone. Only 2. I know plenty of other non-black people who've gotten their whole career is because they knew someone. I know very few blacks who have made a career because they knew someone. It seems troubling to me, because I'm a smart guy, I can do a lot of things, but I've only had 2 jobs my whole life because I knew someone, and it's
Well, man, that is something. I can only imagine if you only got 2 jobs. I can only imagine the trouble that a person who comes home from prison goes through with obtaining a job. But before we get too further into the show, I really want to draw back to what's going on with freedom.
Please lay it out.
And this wrongful conviction. Going back to the points that Freedom was making with those 3 questions that he wanted asked about your child. And I'm connecting with the community right now when I say your child going through a situation with the criminal justice system where they've been charged. When your child goes through something like that and you learn later on that the prosecutor's office, the police department, all conspire together, work together. We don't like using that words on people that we see as, authority figures, but yeah, they do.
They conspire.
Conspire together, and they withheld this information, and it has caused your child to be incarcerated all this time. What then should be the response of yourself, but also what response would you want from the community? And I asked the community that question because the same response that you would want from the community if it was your child going through that situation, that's the same response that Freedom and his family expects from the community in his situation. And the reason why is this, because if they're willing to do that to Freedom,
they'll do it to you.
Who says that they won't do it to your child? Who says that they won't do it to you? If we are not willing to stand together when there's a wrong done in the community, that says a lot about that community.
But you know they bet on it. And this is why we do this. This is why we're doing this show. This is why I do other shows. They actually bet on the black community to do nothing.
Most definitely.
They wait. It's almost like they wait them out like hunters because they will just do nothing. They'll talk. They'll complain. They'll cheer. But giving them enough time, they'll stop cheering. They'll stop talking. And they'll stop complaining, and they'll just move on into the system and behave like the cattle that they believe that we are. And really, truthfully, the apathy, we have become cattle.
Most definitely. But then I'd ask the community to think on this note and on this notion. In our community, when anything has happen, drastic changes have been made.
Yep.
How did that come about? Did it come about from you sitting at home and watching your big screen TV? Did it come about by you driving down the highway in your most comfortable car, thinking about yourself and where you're going? No, it didn't. It came from people unifying behind a cause. Sometimes people's lives were taken based off of their fight.
That's right.
And their willingness to lay it all on the line for the freedom, not just of themselves, but the collective.
Right.
They were willing to give themselves. And for real, our community needs to go back to those old principles because that's the only way we'll get respect.
That's the only
way we'll get recognition. That's the only way issues like this are going to be solved is when the community says, you know what, we're going to unite behind this. So why not pick the phone up and call and say, you know what can I do to get involved? I only have 10, 15, 20 minutes, but in 10, 15, 20 minutes, you can send an email.
That's right.
In 10, 15, 20 minutes, you can make a phone call. In 10, 15 minutes, you can actually send this video to somebody else who may be plugged in somewhere that can render aid and assistance. If we continue to just worry about ourselves and then expect for the community to get involved when something's happening in our house, then we sadly mistaken.
Freedom takes a fight to keep, to have, and to deserve. There's no other way around it. You have to fight for your freedom. You can't, if you only, there is no other way. You have to fight for your freedom. There's not enough metaphors and examples we could give you to let you know that to have freedom, you have to fight for it. And there's multiple ways to fight. You just got to ask us how, and we can direct you how to fight for your freedom.
You know, and I will say this, Dr. Dyer, and this is maybe something that I have my own personal view. My personal view on that is that freedom is something that God gives everybody. By nature of your birth, you're given freedom to be who you are, to express yourself, to be the natural creation that God created you to be, or the creative force created you to be, whatever your religious or spiritual beliefs may be. And sadly, in this world, you have to fight to maintain or to keep your freedom, which you shouldn't have to. You could walk down the street and you could be implicated in a crime that you did not commit and lose your freedom. And so then you have to fight to maintain your freedom. In Freedom's situation, in this instance, that's what happened to him. He was a 19-year-old boy that was accused of a crime that he did not commit. And I may, because of my passion, stumble over my words sometimes, but let me tell you something. My brain is very, very sound. And I'm going to say this again. Freedom was convicted of a crime that he did not commit. And he's not innocent because he's saying that he's innocent. He's innocent based off of fact. And I would challenge the state's attorney or anyone else to prove me wrong. Because, again, when I deal with black and white documentation. That's what I deal with. When I talk to my colleagues and my partners, one in particular, I would say that he's like a mentor to me, older gentleman. I'm not going to put him out there, but he's my mentor. And the one thing that he always tells me is, Joshua, whatever you do, stick to the facts. Don't talk about how you feel. Don't talk about the emotions attached to your response to what you know. Stick to the facts of what's going on. And the fact is, and I'm going to take my glasses off so I can be real clear. Freedom is an innocent man sitting in prison.
We're wrapping up the show this week, Freedom Fight. And we'll be back here in 2 weeks, same time, on a Tuesday at 6 p.m. So if you have any questions about this specifically, you can inbox us, you can share it, you can contact Josh Hatch at freedomfight.info, freedomfight.info, and freedomfighters.info. Sorry, freedomfighters.info. And we're going to get more into this of Freedom's case. But this is a show that we'll be talking about wrongful convictions, prosecutory misconducts, facts. We're going to talk about facts. We want you to understand that this is not just a passion or a feeling that we both have, but we want to talk about facts, and we want to get you engaged and get you armed for your fight. Because there's a fight, whether you know it or not. It's either coming for you or you're already in one. Anything you want to say, Josh, before we take out of here?
Most definitely. I just would, first and foremost, I want to send a sincere thanks to the community for taking the opportunity to even listen in. I most definitely want to extend a thanks from Freedom to the community as well, because I know he's very pleased from the various response that he's received, as well as I've received from, airing this show. But most importantly, I would just say to the community, it's time right now to get involved. The time is now. If you have 10, 15 minutes, like I said, you can make a difference. So let's work together collectively, and let's address some of these issues that are going on inside of our backyard.
For those of you watching on YouTube and on all the social medias, you see the number scrolling below you, but you want to give that number, Josh, again?
The number is 443-822-9208. 443-822-9208.
Thank you. So anyone who's listening on the podcast live, you can always catch all the podcasts. You can share it, like it on iHeart and all your podcast channels. Just put in Bridges Live with Dr. Paul Dyer, and this show will come up. And so, Josh, of course, I'll see you again sooner than later, because we always talk after this. But everyone watching and listening and liking and loving, thank you very much for joining Freedom Fight.